Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to continue with the power rescaling in Dragon Ball. We will go through the entire Saiyan arc, from the Raditz fight to the Vegeta and Nappa invasion to Earth. So let's start right away by explaining the most relevant changes we did in the last video. So, last video, we established 4 different tiers. The first one is tier 0, and here belongs characters that are no fighters, such as Bulma or Pilaf. The next one is tier 1, and here belongs characters with a power level around 1 and 9. These are fighters that don't know how to use ki to enhance their power. For example, Goku and Krillin before training with Rashi, or most of the Red Ribbon Army soldiers. Next, we have tier 10, and characters that belong here have a power level around 10 and 19. These are fighters that have mastered the use of basic ki, or at the very least, they learned how to use it. For example, Grandpa Gohan, Tao Pai Pai, or Master Mutato. Finally, we have tier 20, and here belong characters with a power level between 20 and 29. These fighters possess enough power to conquer entire worlds by themselves, ranging from planets with relative very weak residents, such as Earth, to planets with habitants that possess high technology and/or very high quantity of strong fighters. In the lower end of this tier, you have King Piccolo, Kami-sama, and even Kid Goku in his Ozaru form, which by the way, would explain why Goku was sent to planet Earth, since the Ozaru form of a Saiyan should be enough to eliminate any threat from a weak planet like Earth. Now, before we continue with the Saiyan arc, I want to clarify something important about this reworked power levels. The power levels we are changing to are not linear nor even exponential. Instead, it should be interpreted more as a guide to compare easily different characters. You can change the power levels to any number you want, but the final hierarchy of power remains the same. In simpler words, what really matters is knowing who is stronger than who and the narrative implications of it. Now, let's finally start with the Saiyan arc, specifically the Raditz saga, which occurs 5 years after the 23rd World Tournament arc, also known as the Piccolo Jr. arc. At this point, the strongest known fighters were Goku and Piccolo, and as we established last video, they had a power level of 21 during the 23rd World Tournament. Now, after the 5 years period, it didn't seem that they increased their powers by a lot, which to me is totally fine, especially considering that Goku had to spend a lot more of his time with Chi-Chi and raising his first son, Gohan. In the other hand, Piccolo don't even have a training partner anyway, although I believe he increases his power mostly by meditation. In any case, during these 5 years, Piccolo still was able to develop a very strong ability, the Special Beam Cannon. So, I place both Goku and Piccolo during the Raditz fight still at 21 of power level. They did got stronger, but not enough to warrant the increase to 22 of power level. If anything, their true increase of power was in the development of new abilities, especially in the case of Piccolo. Next, we have the first antagonist from Dragon Ball Z, Raditz, and with him, there were a lot of new concepts introduced to the story, from the Saiyan to the power levels. So because of that introduction, I'll go through every moment from the Raditz saga where the strength of a fighter was calculated by a scout, and I will make the comparison between the original story and our changes. With that in mind, the very first reading of power level we see is no other than the legendary human farmer with a shotgun. In the original story, the scout read a power level of 5. If we apply the changes, farmer with a shotgun, while holding back his real strength, would belong in tier 0, the non-fighter category. So instead of a power level of 5, with our changes, he will have a power below 1, let's say 0.5. The next reading was Piccolo with a power level of 322, and with the changes, he would have shown a level approximately to 21.5. Next reading was from Gohan, with a power level of 710, but we will talk more about this later. And finally, we have the readings of Goku and Piccolo without their weighted clothes, which increase their strength marginally. In the original story, Goku and Piccolo without the clothes have a power level of 416 and 408, respectively. So with our changes, Goku would have a level of approximately 20.6, same with Piccolo, being only slightly weaker by a few decimals. Now, before we establish the power of Raditz, we gotta talk about how he was presented narratively in the story, which was like this overwhelming force, way stronger than anyone before. But as we know, not even an arc later, Raditz was power creeped by pretty much every relevant fighter in the story, even freaking Saibamens were around his strength. This never felt well with me, so I will be making some changes around Raditz Power in comparison to others during the Saiyan arc. With this being said, from now on, we will making a lot of minor changes and clarifications, so bear with me. In the original story, Raditz has a strength level around 1500, almost 4 times stronger than Goku and Piccolo at the time. Personally, that's too much, considering how hard he got power creeped, so I think, at maximum, having twice the power is still good. After all, Goku was still able to fight one-on-one against Raditz for a short period of time. Yes, he still got beaten pretty fast, but it wasn't like he got beaten in just one punch, which is something I would expect of a fighter that is more than 3 times stronger. Plus, even though Raditz was a bit weakened by an enraged Gohan's head, but he still wasn't able to release himself from the hold Goku had over him, which resulted in his death by the special beam cannon of Piccolo. So, I will give Raditz a power level of 22, and yes, it doesn't seem that much higher than Goku and Piccolo's level of 21, but remember the numbers are mostly a guide. But if you have a tough time imagining the difference of power of a single digit, at least at tier 20, you could say that at minimum, the difference is twice the strength. So for instance, the difference between 21 and 22 is at the very least the double of power. Honestly, tier 20 will be very, very tight in terms of power levels, which is pretty much inevitable with the constant increase of strength during the Saiyan arc and especially Frieza arc. Now, 2 fighters of a power level of 21 should be able to beat someone with just 1 level higher, right? I would say yes, but we gotta remember that Piccolo and Goku, at the time of the Raditz fight, were sworn enemies. It is not like they ever fought someone together before, so a good change to the story that could explain this is that both Goku and Piccolo had really bad coordination while fighting together against Raditz, so eventually, they just decided to use the special beam cannon tactic. Plus, both felt intimidated by Raditz power, so that was another minor factor too. Before finishing with the Raditz saga, we only have left Gohan's power level, specifically, when he is enraged, reaching momentarily 1300, surpassing his father's strength by a lot. Although, I understand that showing the potential of Gohan was necessary for the plot, I don't think it was necessary for him to be already so much stronger than his father, considering he is like 5 years old. To me, it is just unnecessary. With that being said, I will still rank an enraged Gohan at tier 20, either with a power level of 20 or 21. Seems good enough to still show the huge hidden potential of Gohan. Now, he was able to damage Raditz, but we gotta remember, the Saiyan was caught by surprise by the sudden increase of power of the kid, explaining why he got so hurted by the attack. Now, it is time to start with the next phase of the Saiyan arc, the Vegeta and Nappa invasion. In the story, between the Raditz fight and the arrival of the other 2 Saiyan, all of our heroes trained for 1 year, waiting for their arrival. Goku died and was able to reach and train with King Kai. Meanwhile, Piccolo trained Gohan and the other fighters, such as Krillin and Tien, were trained by Kami-sama. Let's start with the Z fighters. As we established last video, Krillin and the others were all at tier 10, but after training with Kami-sama during the Saiyan arc, most of them were able to reach tier 20. In the original story, after training with Kami-sama, essentially every fighter was able to surpass Goku, and some even surpassed Raditz. And they all did it under a year, which is just crazy to me. Goku did also train under Kami-sama before, for 3 years, and he didn't become that strong, not even close. So, that somehow, Krillin and the others were able to become so much powerful than Goku is just inconsistent and straight power creeping. So let's start right away, ranking the weakest of the Z fighters at the time, which is Saiyan. Last time we ranked him, he had a power level of 16, and now, after training with Kami-sama, he reached a level of 19. I feel a bit bad about Saiyan being so weak in comparison to the others, so I will give an unnecessary explanation as to why. So, as we know, Saiyan's main abilities are his psychic powers, which requires different kind of training and specialization than the regular style of fighting of the others. And because they only had like 6 months to train with Kami-sama, Saiyan focused mostly in being a training partner for Tien and the others, helping them to increase their power instead of his own. Next, we have Yaoyorobe, who previously had a power level of 18, but after training with Kami-sama, he reached a power of 19, which is very low increase, but still, he is obviously not as motivated to become stronger as the others, and, I am pretty sure, he didn't even learn how to fly, so he mostly trained to help the others, similar to Seiatsu. Next, we got Yamcha, who previously had a power level of 18, and after training with Kami, he reached a level of 20. We have the same situation with Krillin, who is just slightly stronger than Yamcha, but still, with a power level of 20. Finally, Tien, after Kami training, have a power of 21. As a side note, there is a panel where Kami-sama says that all of the Z fighters finally surpassed him. Which is not completely true if we consider the changes we made. A good explanation for this is that Kami-sama meant that he already teach them the way to increase their strength by themselves, without the need of his presence. Next, we have Piccolo, who increased his power from 21 to 22, surpassing Raditz by a marginal amount. Naturally, this is a big change from the original story, since Piccolo was actually way stronger than Raditz during the Saiyan invasion. But this to me doesn't make much sense, considering that he was very focused in training Gohan, and even ignoring that, he only had 1 year of training by himself, so how is possible that he increased his power from 400 to more than 3000 of power level? Especially considering that during the 5-year gap between the 23rd World Tournament and the Raditz fight, his strength level didn't increase by huge amount in comparison. In any case, a Piccolo with the same power as Raditz would still win a one-on-one since Piccolo is more skilled at using his ki than Raditz. Gohan, after the Piccolo's training, would reach a power level of 20, but only if he is not under pressure. A Gohan enraged have a power of 22. Before we get into the Saiyans, we have the Saibamen, who were stated to have a power level of 1200 in the original story, but we are going to nerf them. It is just hilarious that some fodder plants with legs have a strength around Raditz. It's once again just unnecessary power creeping. I understand why it was necessary to show how much powerful the Z fighters became, but there are better, milder ways to do this. Making the previous strongest antagonist completely irrelevant by some literal fodder is almost insulting. I mean, there is a reason why Raditz is so mocked by the fans, even calling him the Yamcha of the Saiyans. Anyways, I rank the Saibamen at tier 10, maybe with a power level of 18 or 19. So, even with these changes, the story progress essentially the same. Tien beats a Saibamen easily. Yamcha is killed by one because he lets his guard down. And Krillin killed the rest by himself. So that's it, we avoided a lot of the power creeping so far, without making any major changes to the plot. Now, we move on to the elite warrior, Nappa, who was stated to have a power level of 4000 in one of the databooks, and he was clearly stronger than all the Z fighters, except Goku. So at minimum it is fair to say that Nappa have a power of 23. I think it should have been possible for Krillin, Tien, and Piccolo to beat Nappa under the ideal situation, but the Saiyan essentially blitzed Tien and incapacitated him the fastest he could, before the others were even able to help him in time. It was also implied that Nappa could have been defeated by the surprise attack of Piccolo and Krillin if Gohan wasn't paralyzed by fear, so it wasn't like Nappa was completely impervious by the attacks of the Z fighters, so a power level of 23 is reasonable. Next, we have Goku after training with King Kai. It was directly stated that his power level is around 8000, or if you prefer, 9000. Making Goku 2 times stronger than Nappa with a power level of 4000. But this number was only stated in a guidebook, and even though Goku was beating Nappa pretty hard at the start, the fight was much even after the bald elite warrior regained his composure. So it is fair to say that even in the original story, Nappa's true strength is not too far off from 8000, which we are going to keep. Thus, I will give Goku base a power level of 23, only slightly ahead by a few decimals over Nappa's. Sadly, this means that we are going to lose the over 9000s meme, but sometimes sacrifices are needed for the greater good. Next, we are going to talk about a very, very troublesome ability, in terms of power scaling at least. The Kaioken. In the story, this technique increases the power of the user by twice the amount, and that's only the base multiplier, since it can go as far as 20 freaking times stronger. I don't think it's too crazy to say that the Kaioken hugely contributed to the power creeping in the story. So inevitably, I gotta do something about the multipliers in general. An easy solution that comes to mind is to simply remove from the story any explicit statement about multipliers. I think is much healthier for the power scaling to give the transformations an undefined increase of power, which will mostly depend over the latent potential of the fighter and also the mastery they have over their respective transformation, or in the case of the Kaioken, the technique. With that being said, we are going to change the Kaioken's mechanic of multipliers, and instead, there will be only two Kaioken modes. The first one is the limited Kaioken, which increases the power of the user, but stress the user's body, although only to manageable levels. The second mode is the maximum Kaioken, which increases the power of the user, past their limits, but it is highly dangerous for the body. With this in mind, let's go through the Goku's fight against Vegeta. The prince, as stated later in the story, has a power level of 18,000, more than twice than Nappa and Goku's. So, I'll give Vegeta a power of 24. Again, the difference of one digit doesn't seem like much, but if you feel like it, it can be easily interpreted as an increase of at least double the power. Because of the difference of strength, Goku can't even make Vegeta fight seriously against him. With no other option left, Goku decides to use the limited Kaioken, increasing his power to 24, almost catching up to Vegeta, but even then, the prince is not just very powerful, but also highly skilled, so he is able to keep up without much difficulty. Once again, Goku is in a difficult situation. Even though with the limited Kaioken, he is almost as strong as Vegeta, the technique still put a lot of stress over his body, so he won't be able to fight Vegeta before his own stamina runs out first. His only option is to use the dangerous, maximum Kaioken and try to defeat Vegeta as fast as possible. Upon using the maximum Kaioken, Goku reach a level of 25, surpassing Vegeta and overwhelming him temporarily. Full of rage, Vegeta decides to blow up the planet with his Gallic gun, and Goku responds with his own Kamehameha while using the limited Kaioken. They struggle for a while, but Goku uses the maximum Kaioken once again, overwhelming the Gallic gun of Vegeta. From now on, the fight still is pretty much the same, but there is one important thing left, the Ozaru form of Vegeta. In the story, Vegeta stated that the Ozaru form increases the power of the Saiyan 10 times over, but you know already how I feel about multipliers. So, our little change is that instead of saying it increases their power 10 times over, he only states that it increases their power considerably, so there it is, an easy fix. So Vegeta in his Ozaru form have a power of 29. Naturally, the Ozaru form have many weaknesses such as the tail and the condition of looking at the moon, also it only increases the raw strength, but in terms of speed and agility, the increase is comparatively much lesser. Before we finish, we also have King Kai left to rank. In the manga, he himself stated to be weaker than Nappa and Vegeta, but in the Dragon Ball Z's filler, he stated that he was stronger than the Ginyu Force. Personally, I prefer the filler's version more, since it gives more respect towards an actual major god from the Dragon Ball universe, so I rank him at a power level of 27. Pretty high up, but it doesn't really affect the plot at all. So we are finally done with the Saiyan arc, and personally, I am pretty happy with the end result so far. As a recap, the most important changes we did was indirectly making characters such as Kami-sama and King Piccolo still somewhat relevant in the power scaling. Also, Raditz is not instantly power creeped by everyone in the story. We also established the change over power multipliers, specifically from the Kaioken and the Ozaru form, which will help us in the future during the Freezer arc. There are also a lot of other minor changes, such as the power of the Saibamen and the Z fighters, which also alleviates the power creeping. I will leave the tier maker's image and also a notepad with the power of all the characters we mentioned during this video, and even some extras in case you want to check it out. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Smiley face.